Welcome to On Tapes, a podcast about the physical medium of VHS tapes. My name is Rowan, and each week my co-host Mark and I will look at 3 tapes. One film which I have chosen, one film which he has chosen, and then a third novelty tape which we pick at random. Could be anything, Mark. Could be anything. And what is it this week?
Well, Rowan, and hopefully I'm coming through to you loud and clear this week, we've got Clint Eastwood's The Bridges of Madison County from 1995. We've got Cocktail, starring Tom Cruise from
Our friend Tom.
1988, and A History of the Region Known as the Black Country.
From what see, Mark is now pointing at a pin of the flag of the Black Country.
Yes.
Yeah, very proud. Would you call yourself a Black Countryman?
I suppose so.
Walsalian?
Well, they say Black Countryman in the documentary we just watched.
They do. We can discuss that. Would you call yourself a Walsalian? What are you people called?
Black Country people, I believe, are called the Yam Yams by those from Birmingham because we say.
Of course, yeah.
Because we say Yoam.
Ah, okay.
That's where that come from.
Good.
I call myself an Edinburgher.
Yeah, you've become
Aberdonian. I'm more of an Aberdonian.
Oh, one of us.
Should we move on to the tapes?
What would you like to begin with, tape-wise?
Bridges of Madison County.
You want to get straight into the bridges?
Yeah, Bridges of Madison County.
Okay, do you want to preface this by talking about your Clint Eastwood obsession?
No, I'm going to get to the Clint Eastwood obsession later.
Okay. Over to you. Take it away with the intro for the film for the time being then.
So it's a film directed by Clint Eastwood, the man with no name himself.
You just said his name.
He plays a photographer called Robert Kincaid who comes to Iowa to take pictures of the beautiful covered bridges of Madison County. And while there, he meets Francesca Johnson, an Italian immigrant played by Meryl Streep.
Of course.
Whose family is away for 4 days, and they begin an affair.
Ooh.
It's based on a novel.
Got a question for you that's just come to me now. What is the purpose of a covered bridge? I don't think they actually mention it in the film. Why cover a bridge instead of just have it exposed?
As a shield from the rain.
Mark has been talking about his extensive notes about this film for so long. Can't even tell me about bridges.
It's not really about the bridges, is it? Except for the bridges between one part of life and the rest of life.
It does kick the plot off. There must be a reason why he's going after these bridges.
Well, they're very beautiful. And
yes. Yeah.
National Geographic wants to have some pictures of them.
What made you pick this one specifically? Because there's quite a few Eastwoods you could have gone for in the VHS era.
Mostly that I've been meaning to watch it.
Oh.
And it's very well acclaimed. I know you would have preferred Absolute Power.
Yeah, I just think there's more meat on the bone.
Absolute Power came out after this.
Thanks.
Not quite sure how to get into this film.
Can I begin with them? We've mentioned it before, but it has the tape begins with the certification rating, which I've talked about being very nostalgic for me.
Yes.
But still, this film was a 12, and I still think we need to get one that has either the PG intro or the U intro, which would really tip me back to my childhood.
Didn't we have Scooby-Doo? Was that 12?
It didn't begin with the... This film is rated U, which means it's suitable for all audiences. It's a very specific intro that they had.
I'll have to get 2001 on tape. That's a U.
Or just some other...
Or some other film.
Childhood ruined film, yeah.
So you've got Meryl Streep playing an immigrant from Barrie who moved to Iowa, I think after the war, or during the war, and settled down and married and had a family. And the film is told from essentially the perspective of her. There's a framing story where her children...
This is how we open the film.
Yeah, we open with her being dead, and it's her funeral, or her will reading.
Going through her possessions and whatnot.
Yeah, and her children discover...
her children and Claire Balding, who they do not like. One of the son's husband. No, the son's wife looks like Claire Balding. Sorry.
Her children discover that when they were away, for 4 days, some point in 1964 or 5.
It begins because there's a note with the will about her wanting her ashes scattered as
Yes.
opposed to being buried next to her late husband.
Yeah, she wants them scattered off Roslyn Bridge, which is where she first went with Kincaid when he was in town.
And it leads them down a rabbit hole finding their mother's possessions and finding the notes and a note that she had left her kids, telling them about this.
Yes, indeed. And their initial reaction is to think that this is disgusting and she's had an affair and that she's a slut.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. Go on.
But then they start reading through all of the letters and all of the possessions that she's left behind. And we get the flashback to Francesca's point of view.
Yeah.
And we start seeing how this romance developed.
Here's one for you. Meryl Streep's accent.
Yes.
Was it distracting to you?
Not at all. And I'll tell you why.
Really?
She's essentially playing Anna Magnani. She's literally playing an exact, she's doing Anna Magnani.
Who's that?
The famous Italian actress, Rowan. Star of Mamma Roma.
Do I know who this is?
You should do. She's quite famous. One of the most acclaimed actresses of all time.
Drawing a blank.
She's doing Anna Magnani. She looks just like her. She's doing the accent.
Interesting, but you do know, I mean, we all know Meryl Streep. She's like Hollywood's kind of mother/grandmother at this point. It was very distracting to me.
Not to me, but then again, I'm not really a Meryl Streep person.
No, but you just know her from things. You know,
I
she's
suppose so.
very much not Italian. I knew you were going to like this film, by the way.
How did you know that?
Just by how much you've been banging on about Clint Eastwood and the fact that you like that he's a sweet old man. And this role is Clint Eastwood, the sweet old man.
Ah, is it though?
I mean, yes, pretty much. That's why you liked it.
Well, it's not that much of him being a sweet old man, per se.
He's not the mean old man, though.
Like
That you would get in Gran Torino or something.
I like him in Gran Torino. He's sweet towards the end.
Did anything stick out to you about the directing of this film, specifically, as much as you like Eastwood?
Yes, so much, and I'm glad you say that, because Clint has this kind of reputation as being a very hands-off director, but not in the slightest. It's very subtle, and there's so many great scenes where he sort of invisibly directs our emotions.
Okay.
For example, when they're in the first car ride...
Yeah, out to the bridge for the first time.
Yeah, they go to the bridge for the first time. There's a sort of back and forth conversation between them. The entirety of the first part of this conversation, the camera is framed outside the car looking in, and we get both of them in the image at once. And then Francesca says that, because she's talking about how, Pia, she's from Italy, and she's from a small town that no one's ever heard of, presumably because she's told this story all the time, people don't know it. She's from Bari.
Yes.
And then it cuts to Robert inside the car looking surprised, and the camera is positioned for the first time in this scene inside the car, and it really sort of brings you into the scene, and it feels like, and then they have this sort of short conversation where there's so much excitement between them, and he's excited to hear that she's from Bari, and she's excited that he's actually heard of this because no one ever has, and then he very slightly touches her leg and it's sort of awkward, and the whole sort of bit inside the car feels totally inundated from the outside world. It feels like they aren't bound by society's rules while they're in there. There's just this twinkling of the first sparks of their love. And the whole scene is like, there's a sort of building of momentum there. The shots and the cuts start to get faster as they're going ahead, and it's kind of reflected on the macro level in the whole of the film, because the way the film is structured with the 4 days, the first day is quite long, and the second day is a bit shorter, and the third day is much shorter, and the fourth day just flies right past. And it's often like that when you remember things,
Yeah.
because as the film sort of progresses, you feel this kind of weight approaching, and that's when it sort of gets faster, and there's going to be a reckoning.
Yeah. I'm just saying a lot, but I know exactly what you mean, yeah.
Well, the other thing I was going to mention... the other thing I was going to mention about the images is they're not... The imagery in the film is very beautiful, but it's not in this sort of pretty, look at me, one perfect shot kind of way. Because he gives you sort of just enough detail to understand the significance of the scene. Like, there's a great bit early on where under the bridge, when you get this kind of beautiful imagery of nature and the outdoors. It's not show-offy, it's just there. And you can kind of see Francesca looking at Robert, and, you know, she seems quite flustered and hot. Because she wants him. And then she sort of, like, goes under the bridge and she kind of presses herself against the wood to try and cool off. And then starts sort of looking at him through the wood. Mm-hmm. And she's kind of covered. She's like sort of hiding from the world in this sort of dark, cold underpass. And he's out there in the light. And sort of her performance is quite subtle in that scene as well. But yeah, going back to the whole thing about he's giving you enough detail to understand the significance. There's like the shot towards the end, right? The scene towards the end where Robert is out there waiting in the rain for her to...
I'm sorry, I'm not giving you a lot, but I'm just letting you go because I know you want to get this out.
Robert is out there waiting in the rain for her. And then he goes back to his truck, and then her husband comes into the truck, and they're behind him in the truck.
Yeah.
It cuts to a sort of close-up of
hand.
her sort of, on the door handle. And it's almost this, like, Robert Bresson style thing, but it's just giving you the detail of the hand on the door handle. You know there's so much weight in that image. It's so powerful because it represents, like, her and Robert. The only thing separating them is this door handle. It's not symbolism. It literally is just a car door handle, but it means so much because it means her choice between freedom and staying where she is.
I know what you mean. And I think you were disappointed that I didn't get as much from this film as you. Because hearing you talk now, you obviously went very much into this film.
I spent the last 30, 40 minutes of this film crying continuously.
Oh, you'll be disappointed to know that I spent the last 30 to 40 minutes of this film struggling to stay awake.
That's insane.
I was quite tired.
Don't know how.
I watched this film quite late at night, But before I'm going to admit I watched this film in 2 sittings.
Which I don't think is good.
No, but I wanted to fit it. I thought I could fit it in before work. I could not. So I was really enjoying it up until I left.
And then you came back and it wasn't the same.
No.
Much like life. A few other things about Clint's directing is like the indoor scenes are very dark and the outdoor scenes are quite light. I enjoy that contrast.
There's some aspects where it's not like that. There's early on, the first night in the house, I think is still it's a weird in between point.
Yeah.
Which I guess is a weird in between point for their relationship as well.
That's true. I guess it just made me think of a quote I heard by Clint once where a cinematographer was saying people really can't see what's going on in this scene. And he went, well, we've already gone through 6 reels of story. If people don't recognise me by now...
Yeah.
And Clint's always said he doesn't really care that much about seeing all the details. You just need to see what's important and people get the idea.
Speaking of details, obviously you've made it clear that you enjoyed this film on a grand scale. I picked up on one thing that I know that you would have liked. At one point, Robert calls himself a citizen of the world.
Sure does.
Which you have often referred to yourself as. You are not bound by borders.
No. Well, Clint's like a libertarian, isn't he?
Clint or Robert?
Both.
Okay.
It's Clint. He's playing himself. He always is.
There you go.
People think Clint's conservative, but he's more just sort of about, freedom.
Yeah. Did he adapt the novel himself?
No, it was written by Richard Lagravanese.
Okay. Not familiar. Sounds Italian?
Dunno.
Oh.
I didn't know much about him. Did you read much about the novel when you were looking into the film at all?
I don't think I did, no.
Because everyone seems to say that this film, the novel is awful.
Really?
And it's just a shit sort of paperback romance, very disposable kind of trash.
Did you ever read that romance novel I bought you for your birthday?
The Mills and Boon novel? I did not.
You promised you would read it.
Yeah, I promised a lot of things.
You say that it's or it was received as a poor book.
Well, popular, but not critically well received.
Sure, and then you also mentioned that Clint Eastwood just plays himself in a lot of things. How similar is his character in the book, Robert in the book, compared to Clint's performance?
I don't know anything about the novel.
Okay, fair enough.
The thing about...
how do you feel about the acting in this film in general, then? Well, I assume it must be an upgrade over the book.
I assume
based on what you're suggesting.
Well,
but
the thing about Clint's character...
The life that they inject into these characters...
He's not playing himself, but he's, like, bring his star persona into the film.
Sure. Yeah.
And there's kind of it's a good contrast between the two of them, because Streep is all about method acting, and she's the one who we are seeing the story from the point of view of. It's all about her emotions and her experience, and all of those emotions are on the surface, whereas the Kincaid character, the Robert character, is played by Clint, and he's got that steely quality that makes him very inscrutable.
Yeah.
Which makes them very well suited for the roles.
Yes, because she goes back and forth with how she deals with that kind of persona throughout the film.
Yeah.
Because obviously at the start it's very intriguing and mysterious and she's drawn to it. But then she kind of recognises that it's an issue, almost.
Yeah.
Not so much an issue, but it's something that could become an issue because she picks up on the fact that he likes to move around a lot and there's no permanent. She doesn't see any permanence with this.
Well, I mean, it's kind of... There's like a dual element to that scene that I think you referred to where she calls him a hypocrite.
Yes, that's the one.
Where she's kind of right to accuse him of that because he's got this sort of voyeuristic, wandering view of life where he never really gets totally involved. And she's, on the one element, she's kind of like saying this to him because she wants to believe that it's not true love because it'll be easier to move away from him. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, she's kind of right because the film... Well, Clint's previous two films, this Unforgiven and White Under Black Heart, were both kind of interrogations of his persona.
Yeah.
And this film, it kind of doesn't seem like it is like that, but in a way, it kind of is, because it's an attack on Clint's sort of idealised image of representing freedom and transition.
Freedom?
Freedom. And living without responsibility. And you can see sort of how that affects people who don't have that liberty. And how that affects not just Francesca, but kind of how we, the viewer, who probably don't live like Robert Kincaid does.
No.
Or how a lot of Clint's characters do. How we idealise Clint and how she idealises him.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things he says. Like at one point, he's like, "Oh, I just got on a train because it was. I got off the train because it was pretty."
Yeah, and she
no plans.
She reacts to that like, "You just got off the train."
Yeah, that's like the strangest thing in the world to her.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's definitely something that I could be like, yeah, I would love to do that.
Yeah, well, because she's very entrapped in her sort of society.
Do you feel like attitudes like that have changed over the years since this film came out? What, 20 odd years ago?
Probably a bit. But not that much.
Because I don't think... Oh, no, to be fair, I mean, this is the 6 days it's set. So, yeah. But I do feel like attitudes towards that have changed. I feel like saying I got off a train because it was pretty and just stayed a few weeks isn't the most shocking thing in the world to say now.
No. But she's in, like, quite a conservative
Definitely.
town.
Definitely. I mean, they mention that they mention that throughout. Like, that's one of the points for her. It's like, if anyone got a whiff of this affair...
Yeah.
It would ruin...
Because there's the other character who is revealed to have had an affair.
Lucy something.
Delaney?
Sure.
And she's, like, ostracised from society.
Yes, yeah. And Francesca can kind of foresee that happening to her if things were to progress with Robert.
Yeah, and she's got, like, her neighbours who come round to visit, and she clearly doesn't like them very much, but they're, town friends. So she just has to be nice to them.
You know what it's like to be... home but not home.
Yeah.
In a way, I mean, you've lived away from the Black Country for years now, and you get used to it, but yeah, it's not home.
It's weird, isn't it? Because I was reading about this film, and some people like Jonathan Rosenbaum called it a conservative fantasy, which was a very odd thing to say about a film where you've got an immigrant woman coming to terms with being unfulfilled by the American dream.
Yeah.
And then it ends with her finding solidarity with another woman who has been cast out from their patriarchal community. Mm-hmm. Very strange.
People read what they want to read, though, don't they?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, maybe just because he's usually more insightful.
Yeah. Or what the consensus is, you just go with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I said when we started doing this, like, this film didn't leave a huge impression on me, but talking to someone who liked it, you kind of broadens kind of your view and opinions of things, and I have a different appreciation for this film now. I'm not going to say I loved it.
That's fair enough. What did you think of the framing story? Because some people don't like that aspect of it at all.
I mean, I didn't like... I understand that you're getting two sides of it, obviously having the two children The son annoyed me. Very whiny.
I mean, I think he was supposed to.
I know, but it's meant to be annoying, and then it's just like, I'm sick of this. Stop cutting to this bloke.
Well, I understand where you're coming from in that sense, but I think the framing story to me is so totally necessary to what this film is actually about. Because without that, it'd just be this kind of generic romance story, which I imagine the novel is kind of like.
Yeah.
Where it's just two people meeting and they can't really be in love because she has other commitments, blah, blah, blah. But with this, the fact that it begins with her being dead and him being dead, it kind of...
It's all about knock-on effects and implications. The whole story is based on that.
Yeah, and even more so. I mean, it takes this simple story of unfulfilled romance and gives it a sort of transcendent, almost metaphysical quality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it kind of becomes a film that's not just about, like, love.
There are more sequels. Sorry about this.
It becomes a film about memory and life and death. Because the film, we're getting the film from Francesca's point of view. We don't know if this is what the romance of Robert was really like.
Yeah.
This is just how Francesca remembers it. And
as you mentioned before, like, hinting at that with the pacing of it, like, we are just witnessing a person's memory.
Yeah, exactly. The fact that it ends... I mean, how many romances end with the hero having died off screen and the heroine's ashes being scattered into the wind? I mean, honestly, I was thinking of, like, Ozu watching this film. Just the fact that it becomes this sort of spiritual thing to me. Not religious, more secular.
Yeah, of course.
It has the kind of... It's about not just this... It's not just small scale about this romance. It's about whole lives.
Mm-hmm.
And the significance of, like, one little thing that you remember and whether or not you should have taken a certain path. I mean, do you think that Francesca was right to stay with her family, or should she have kind of run off with Robert?
Depends on who for, doesn't it? That's the thing. For her kids, for who?
Well, there's, like, those are the questions, but also, like, maybe her love for Robert was just this transient thing that she needed to sustain herself through her life, and maybe she would have run off with Robert and realised they don't actually have that much in common, and she should have stayed with her family.
Like a holiday romance kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it is, in a way, for him.
You know, maybe her, just the memory is part of...
The magic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because it is incredibly, like, idealised.
Yeah.
I was surprised how it treated her sort of sexual awakening in this very... It wasn't, like, voyeuristic or exploitative at all. But it was very much...
Laid bare.
Yeah. I feel like you don't get that many films, like, about a 40-year-old woman's having a, like, lusting, very sexual after this 65-year-old man.
Is that how old he was here?
He's 65 here. Looking pretty good for his age. Did you find the sort of, like, just the basic, like, actors playing off each other aspect engaging?
I mean, yeah, they had chemistry. That's what I'm saying. Before I left for work and came back really tired, I was into their two-person routine.
Yeah, because I kind of spent most of that aspect just smiling and enjoying their company. And then it was sad.
When was the last time a film brought you to tears?
Actually, it was Clint Eastwood's Honky Tonk Man.
Interesting. I think I shed a tear at $1 Million Baby.
Interesting. Well,
that was years ago, but yeah.
Now that you've mentioned that, I was going to ask you, what do you think of Clint Eastwood more generally? Because you've seen quite a few of his films. Not quite a few, but a few.
Yeah, a good handful. 5, 6.
Yeah. What do you think of Clint Eastwood? Do you like him?
I get what you're saying, that he is regarded as being like a meat and potatoes type of director. Gets the job done, but it is more than that. There is like I don't know how you put it, but there is this... It's just good narrative.
Yeah.
He weaves a good narrative.
It's interesting.
There's a lot of people who can take stories and be like, oh, it's a good film. But he does kind of sprinkle something on these stories that would otherwise probably be
Oscar
less
bait.
spectacular. Yes.
Yeah, because in the 70s he was considered this kind of reactionary, fascistic type figure. And then these days I think people tend to maybe think of him as this kind of conservative, middle-brow, Oscar bait type of guy.
Yeah.
But he's always had his defenders. I mean, in 1982, Orson Welles, our old friend from last week, called him the most underestimated director in the world.
Underestimated? What an interesting word to use. Instead of,
Yeah,
I guess underrated wasn't the thing to say then.
probably not. You wouldn't see Orson Welles saying underrated, would you? Underestimated. Did you know that Godard dedicated his film Detective to...
Why did you sound South African?
He dedicated Detective in 1985 to John Cassavetes, Edgar Giolma and Clint Eastwood.
Oh, the boys.
I mean, have you seen the video of Godard presenting the honorary Caesar Award to Clint?
I have not.
He gives him an award and says, "This is a little thing for you, Mr. Unky Tonk Man." And then Clint says, "Merci, Jean-Luc."
Good stuff.
Well, one thing, of course, Orson Welles had in common with Clint is being hated by Pauline Kael, as we discussed last week. In her Dirty Harry review, she basically called the character of Dirty Harry, and implicitly Clint himself, a racist and a fascist.
Oof.
And that so haunted Clint, right, that like at one point he literally read out the review to his psychoanalyst. He really didn't like it. And that's kind of what led him in his later films to be interrogating his image so intently.
Yeah.
But he's always been very
It was
critical.
a good thing that she said that.
In a way.
I mean, we wouldn't have got pictures like these.
She's still
otherwise.
awful, isn't she? Well, I mean, he's always been taken quite seriously in France. I mean, Cahiers du Cinema called Madison County one of the top 3 films of the 90s.
He and Jerry Lewis.
Yeah.
The French get it.
I've got a quote here from, of all people, Jean Baudrillard, author of Simulation and Simulacra, who had this to say about Clint, specifically in relation to Madison County, and more generally about him. He says, "Initially a cowboy film hero, abstract and fleshless, asexual. Then an urban lawman, equally austere. A battler against evil, but with a certain weakness for the weaker sex. Ending up as a photographer. Still an outsider, but this time finding love in the clandestine intimacy of the rural world." It goes on a bit. "The other tycoons, Brando, Nicholson, are monsters who don a different mask with every film and dissolve into the larger-than-life characters they play. Polymorphous monsters whom a certain madness carries beyond their character parts, but who do not chart an individual course. Clint Eastwood is the only one to remain true to his mythological profile." What do you make of that?
He has always had this status, just not even related to cinema, because he's obviously become like a pop culture figure.
Well, people say Jack Nicholson and Marlon Brando play themselves, but they still go into their characters. They're playing a version of a character that's sort of filtered through themselves. Where Clint is always the kind of, as he says, mythological Clint Eastwood figure.
Yeah.
Whether he's playing a photographer or a cop or a
I'd never
cowboy.
even thought about it before. Now that you've said it, I'm recalling all these roles where you said that he is now just challenging his own persona in his work, which I hadn't even considered till now. But now that I think about it, it's like, yeah, I can definitely see that in the stuff that I've seen him do in his own films anyway, and the ones that he's directed.
Any particular ones that stand out?
Obviously, Unforgiven, where he's
of course.
playing not his typical cowboy. Gran Torino, as we mentioned earlier.
Gran Torino almost seems like grown-up Dirty Harry.
But yeah, this whole thing, as you mentioned in the Kale quote that she called him a racist. I mean, that film is him playing a racist.
Yeah.
And then learning
to not be a racist.
Yeah, good.
In White Hunter Black Heart, he's kind of playing John Huston in Africa.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I don't know.
No,
it's John Huston.
Not a bad John Huston.
Like John, he kind of turns into Daniel Day-Lewis, Daniel Plainview at some point, doesn't it? I'm an oil man.
I drink your milkshake.
In White Hunter Black Heart, he plays Johnny Huston going to Africa and making himself to be this kind of grandiose figure, but he's just there to kill an elephant. And he sort of plays the role of a kind of anti-racist in White Hunter Black Heart, the John Huston character. But it just seems like he's more doing it as a kind of... Not because he actually cares, more because he wants to seem like the bigger man.
Yeah. Upkeep his persona.
Yeah, exactly. As a sort of individualist who cares about things. And that's kind of what Clint is interrogating in that film.
So do you think you're just beginning with your Eastwood Obsession, like, as avid listeners of the podcast will recall, Mark's John Ford phase. How's that one going?
Still good.
Yeah, it's still good. Yeah.
Still watched a few.
Is there a lot more Eastwood you want to watch?
Yeah, God, I added like 10 to my watch list
Well,
last week.
listen, stay tuned to the on tapes. He may come up again.
Interesting you mentioned John Ford. They're kind of similar, aren't they? Ford and Eastwood.
Oh yeah, and the phrase I used before was like meat and potatoes, which is what they're both seen as. Like not enough unique quirkiness to have a style that people would like. You know, like people on Twitter would post like, "Oh, here's some Eastwood shots," but like, there's none of that. But I feel like it's more part of the whole in a film as opposed to like these shots. It's all
Underappreciated.
working together in a way that creates a greater sense.
Yeah, it becomes very sort of poetic and transcendent.
Yeah, the kind of film you shouldn't watch in two cities. I'm sorry.
Maybe not on VHS.
Oh.
Both as well directors who've accused of being conservative and reactionary, but actually have a kind of distancing thing going on where they're actually interrogating the things they're accused of propagating as much as they are.
Did Eastwood ever make propaganda?
He never made the Battle of Midway or anything like that. He did do Flags of Our Fathers.
Oh, yes.
And then he made Letters from Iwo Jima.
Same year, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
or the year after, where it's the same plot but from the Japanese side
Yeah.
and the one from the American side, which is very interesting.
Yeah. Are
Yeah.
we wrapping this up?
Yeah, I guess so. I just really love Clint. It was really hard to bring across my passion for this film.
Oh. Well, I mean, that's why I let you go, because, I mean, I would never want to stop someone from expressing joy for cinema.
True. Me
That's
neither.
what we're all about here.
I mean,
Speaking of which, cocktail. No.
no, we can get into Cocktail. I was just going to say that, you know what I like about Clint is that he always makes films that are very... Because you mentioned it being a good narrative, this film, but at the same time, like, it's a very steadily paced film. And most of his films aren't really about the narrative, which a lot of Oscar-type films are about. They're about the sort of journey and the little bits of life. I mean, look at The Mule. That's a film that's kind of, like, on the one hand about FBI stuff, but what it's really about is Clint driving around having a nice chicken sandwich.
That's what I was... That's what I was kind of getting at. It's like he can take things and make it more than just like a story.
Yeah, so just sort of about life, the journey. Drive around, delivering drugs, stopping off at the ribs.
So we love Clint here, I guess you could say. Mark loves Clint.
I love Clint.
There we go.
I forgot to mention the thing about how a lot of his films were produced by Malpaso, where he had this kind of like whole creative hub going on. And he was like I've seen it compared to like a jazz quartet or whatever, because he's really into his jazz, Clint, as we saw in that one scene in Madison County, where he's like the ensemble leader, but then like he's got all these people around him doing their own things, and sometimes he'll let some of them direct their own films, and he'll kind of be involved in them through that. And that's kind of like what his films are kind of like. They're just about, you know, rhythm,
Yeah.
movement, life, like jazz. He's like jazz. Maybe that's why Godard compared him to... Well, he said that he was dedicated to Olmer, Cassavetes, and Clint. Cassavetes' films have been compared to jazz, and Edgar G. Ulmer's all about the details. Do you have what's your favourite Clint film before we stop?
Well, I still want to watch Absolute Power, so that could still be in the running at some point.
Fair enough. Mine is Honky Tonk Man,
Okay.
which isn't one of his most well-seen films.
So are you prepared to talk about Cocktail?
This is a film I'm significantly less passionate about. Although, interestingly, two very different conceptions of alpha masculinity. I was very surprised when you showed up with Cocktail. What prompted you to pick Cocktail?
I was surprised as well. I don't know why. I think I might have seen something about it the day before and bought it, and then it arrived, and then we were recording. I unwrapped it as I was leaving my flat to come here and record the last episode. I don't know what possessed me, but
I have been meaning to watch more 80s Tom.
Tom. Yeah, we started calling him Tom last week. I'm not sure why we started that.
It's Tom. You're going to call him Cruise, aren't we?
Did you just call him Tom Cruise?
I'm going to call Clint Eastwood Eastwood.
Can I say something? I've seen this poster for this film about a lot.
I've seen a lot.
I always thought he was playing pool.
Interesting.
The way his hands here and his hands back here,
You weren't alerted by the tagline that says it pours. No.
No, when he pours, he rains.
Yeah.
Well, no, but just like you see it at a glance. Do you see what I'm?
Yeah, yeah.
So this tape, I
Touchstone home videotape.
yes, I made a note. Did you like the cavalcade of advertisements at the start of it?
Yes. Lots of different Touchstone home video films.
You start with the big guns. Should I
No,
read out?
Top Gun.
Should I read out all of the trailers at the start of this tape?
Yeah, sure.
There's a lot of them. Good Morning Vietnam, Cocktail, Three Men and a Baby, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Adventures in Babysitting, Tough Guys, Outrageous Fortune, Deadly Pursuit, Tin Men, Can't Buy Me Love, DOA, Dead on Arrival, Down and Out in Beverly Hills, Big Business, Hello Again, and Offbeat.
Very much an up and down kind of.
The thing is, it gives a good few seconds to like Good Morning Vietnam and the big films. By the time you get to like Big Business, they're flying by. And here was me trying to take notes on all of them really quickly, note down the titles.
Did you have to pause and go back?
No, I managed to do it, but
They're all in this box. I forgot about that.
didn't notice they're all on the interior spine. When I put this tape back in, I was like, oh, why have I done that? But interesting, it has a trailer for the film you're watching. They
Yeah.
almost didn't care too much to not have that as an oversight.
This film is infamously bad, isn't it?
Yeah. I'll tell you what.
I haven't seen any other 80s Tom stuff. I haven't seen Risky Business.
Oh, Risky Business is really good.
I should have watched that.
That was-
I've seen Rain Man.
That was kind of one of the things that made me want to watch this. Is I really liked Risky Business when I watched it a few months ago.
I do, because he was so much more aspirational in the 80s.
Yeah.
That's what he was all about.
Yeah.
Even this film where he's playing the idea is he's playing a schlub who wants to be a yuppie.
Yeah.
It's still something aspirational about Tom's whole conception.
But there's that whole sequence that I find it amusing that I don't know how he got all these interviews, but it's just him going to job interviews over and over again.
Yeah.
I'm like, how do you get this many job interviews?
Kind of relatable, that whole thing.
Yeah.
Where, well, actually, it's kind of inverse
The rejection montage.
It's kind of inverse of what you've got now. Whereas, because he goes to these interviews and they're like, he's like, well, I just want to get some experience, and they're like unique qualifications. Whenever I go to an interview nowadays, it's like, I've got qualifications, no, you need experience.
Well, I mean, they're always going to give you the other thing, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right.
They're always going to ask what you for
get
what you
rid
don't
of
have.
you.
I'm realising we haven't spoke about the plot of this film. That's because it's insane.
It's bizarre. I like his Australian mentor.
It opens with him and his army buddies in a jeep trying to chase down a boss with a siren or something.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was like, "What's happening?" He ends up going back home, working in his uncle's bar. He wants a job in a new bar, a busy bar. So he has this mentor, Doug, I think.
Doug, yeah. Who's Australian.
He's also a lot older than him,
Yeah.
but they don't know if he is or not. If that makes sense, because in one scene it's like mentor and mentee relationship, but then the next you're just like old friends, and like this is weird. You're like
There's a bit
like
where
at least 10, 15 years between them.
they get into an argument about a woman, and then Tom runs away, moves to Jamaica, and then Doug shows up 3 years later, I believe.
The best part about that scene is it's Tom Cruise getting his whole what's his name, Brian? It doesn't seem like a Brian,
No.
so I'm just gonna call him Tom. And I think the actor playing Doug, his name is Brian.
Yes.
So if we say
Confusing.
Brian, it'll be this old bloke. Tom starts going out with Gina Gershon,
Yeah.
and they have this.
I haven't seen Gina Gershon in the 80s, I don't think.
Me neither. I don't think she has this plan for him to move to Jamaica to make a bunch of money. The next scene is his old Brian showing up at Gina shows up at the club and just starts kissing him, and Tom Cruise just looks at him, and I was like, oh, it's a dream sequence. It's like a paranoia dream sequence because it's so absurd that it couldn't be real. And then it just didn't cut. And then it just kept going. And the next cut was him in Jamaica, which was the plan he had for her. But I guess when you have your heart broken by someone, you think, oh, that business plan you had was quite good though. And you just go through with it.
What a weird... I liked the scenes where Tom was in business school.
Yeah,
Was
in the
that
classroom.
was that those scenes similar to your experience of university at all?
No,
Was it
our
similar
classes
to
were much
like-
smaller.
True.
And you couldn't fall asleep because there was like 10 people in the room.
No,
He couldn't fall asleep either. He got caught, but you know what I mean.
I did like how focused the business school was on sort of cynical yuppie type things.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point the guy was like, well, we have to do some of those outdated practices like reading and writing.
As someone who has recently started working at a bar, the beginning of this film I thought was very fun, with him being flustered in the bar and getting hit in the face by the till. His first shift, I was like, oh, this could be fun. And then he starts getting into it, starts making cocktails and getting into it, and I'm like, oh, this could be going somewhere. And then he gets the job, and he randomly gets this job in the it's called like Cell Block or something, the jail themed club.
Oh yeah,
did you like that?
It was alright.
With the and then it just gets insane because there's a yuppie reading a poem, and then Tom Cruise just hops up at the bar and starts reading his own poem.
Yeah, I didn't understand what his whole reading poem thing was about.
That is where it lost me. That's where it completely lost me.
And the poem seemed to go on for quite a long time.
There's a point where the yuppie is reading his poem and he goes, "It takes money to overthrow the government," and then Tom just goes, "That's deep." But also the whole relationship between
Tom Cruise signed on to this film specifically. That's how they got the funding. Was Tom was interested.
I mean, wouldn't you be?
I mean, I've never seen it. I've not seen as many films as this where I can really say this is very much a vehicle.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was what the 80s was. You don't get that as... Maybe you do get them as now, but they're more just the same as every other film. You know what I mean?
There's only 5 actors these days.
They don't ever try and launch anyone new.
No.
Well, the way you break into acting now is to do a Marvel film.
Or be a child of someone.
There you go. But yeah, this is him. Obviously, had his early 80s buzz, and it's like, we needed this guy to have a standout role. He's in this Rain Man thing, but he's not the main. He's one of the mains, being overshadowed by this older actor. But cocktails are going to break this guy out. All the young women are going to love him in Cocktail with his shaker and his shirts.
And his hair.
And his tooth, his weird tooth.
Do you like the Tom hair? I really like Tom's hair.
Let me look at this case.
It's the classic Tom hair.
Yeah, it's like 80s bad boy, isn't it?
It's the screenwriter of this film also wrote Rolling Thunder and The Boys from Brazil, based on a novel apparently.
This is?
Yeah.
Really?
I think so. Yeah.
It almost, you mentioned Madison County being like a terrible, cheap, whatever novel.
I'm imagining Cocktail was the same thing.
The amount of weird left turns this film takes. Because not only does he go, he ends up back in New York, he doesn't stay in Jamaica.
Yeah.
You could describe this film as a cocktail of bad decisions on his part.
I mean, the worst aspect of it for me...
It's going to rush over that, thanks.
Yeah. The worst aspect of the film for me was the romance plot at the end.
Yeah.
It just came out of nowhere. It rang very hollow.
Yeah, this whole feud he has... Well, that's another weird thing that comes out of nowhere, that he impregnates Elizabeth Shue.
Yeah.
And again, that's another scene where he's like, you couldn't say anything to make me leave or whatever, and she's like, I'm pregnant. And I was like, oh, it's another bit. Like, it's another, like, she's going to be like, oh, I got you. No, she's just pregnant. It's baffling.
And then he stalks her.
He does. He, like, goes to her work and won't leave, and, yeah, not the best look. But it's the 80s. That's apparently what you had to do.
And then Tom decides that he does love her. Well, first he does his thinking face.
He also beats the shit out of the concierge.
He really goes to town on that guy.
Like, badly. And then the father as well. And it's like, that's the point where she's like, oh no, I want to be with this guy. I want this guy to raise my kid.
Well, he beats up her father and, you know...
It's like the most toxic relationship ever. And it's like, that's your happy ending.
I like the scene where they played Addicted to Love because it made me think of American Psycho.
Yeah, you mentioned that last week,
Yeah.
that Cocktail invokes thoughts of American Psycho for you. You called the novelization instead of the novel. There's also a running theme through this where a lot of the important turning points, I say important, they happen all the time, the turning points in this film seem to come from the fact that Tom and Brian are just making bets.
Yeah.
And
It's
a lot
like
of things...
sort of one-upmanship thing they got going on.
Yeah, a lot of like, oh, why did you do it? A bet?
And then at the end, Tom is like, listen, when a man makes a bet with you, you have to stick to that bet.
Yeah, and that's like a righteous, like, oh, yeah, he's made a good point there. Like, that's what we were meant to
There's
think.
a whole thing about them being like working men. Take pride in your work.
Yeah. But also they get so far away from it. Like, you'd think, like, oh yeah, pride in bar work and being good at flair and all that nonsense. But by the end of this, you get so far away from any of the bar stuff. They have to shoehorn it back in with, like, oh, he's dead. Let's open a bar. Remember, it's about cocktails.
What did you think of how this film looked? When it started, I thought, is this pan and scanned? No, it wasn't.
It wasn't the best.
Yeah,
I assume this tape is from the time. It's from the late 80s.
probably. Visually, it looked bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Even like when it got to the nice beach Jamaica scenes, it looked a bit.
I mean, that's that impeccable Roger Donaldson direction, isn't it?
Well, you like to talk about your pre-Giuliani New York. Did you get any of those vibes from watching Cocktail?
A little bit, yeah, quite a bit actually.
With the
kind of like the whole milieu.
I felt it more so with the Uncle's Bar.
Yes, and the diner scene where Elizabeth Shue was working.
Yeah.
That's with the.
There was a scene, I don't know if you picked it up, where I think it's after he's got beaten up or something. He's standing outside and there's a cinema playing Casablanca for some reason.
I saw that.
Big on the marquee, it says Casablanca, like Bergman, Bogart, or whatever.
It's like this film.
Yeah.
It's a bar. It's a bar. There you go. It's a connection.
It's a bar. There you go.
And it's about love.
Love.
And crap.
Yeah, and good friendships, right?
Yeah. The director of this film, of course, also directed Species.
Of course.
like
You want
that
to talk
one.
about Species? You fine?
Oh, I saw Species when I was quite young, and I think it always just stuck with me.
One
as
of
a film
those?
that was good. And also, I was also a big fan of Roger Donaldson's film The World's Fastest Indian,
Go on.
starring Anthony Hopkins as a New Zealand guy who goes to America with a motorbike. The bike is called an Indian.
Have we seen this trailer at the beginning of a tape or something?
We might well have
Why
done.
does this sound so familiar?
And then
I feel like I've seen the trailer for this film, but I don't watch old trailers.
He's trying to win like a motorbike speed race or something across some salt flats, and I really liked that film when I was younger, even though it's kind of like a schmaltzy mid-2000s generic kind
Yeah.
of upbeat drama.
Yeah. Why do I know that? Anyway.
And Anthony Hopkins had a New Zealand accent in it. Via Wales.
I'm not sure what else we can add to Cocktail.
The thing about talking about Cocktail is, it's such a mess that any attempt to talk about Cocktail will be a mess.
There you go. It's a paradox. It's a paradox.
When he pours, he rains.
No, when he rains, he pours. No. Yes, you're right.
When he rains, he pours is the usual phrase.
I know.
I'd say rains as in REIGN, in case the audience wasn't aware.
Yeah, and the pour isn't like a...
Just pouring
Drink.
a drink.
Maybe they'll do a Cocktail 2 after Top Gun 2.
They should do. You know what, though? Cocktail, it wasn't the worst film I've ever seen. It had some kind of elements that I liked or enjoyed.
Same.
Yeah,
I mean, as I said, the working in a bar bit was quite cute.
it's not the worst film ever made. Some people
It's just bizarre.
7% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed parts of it. It was an interesting experience.
Tom was good.
Yeah. Again, I think I just not liked it more, just appreciated it more, even though I knew it was not good.
Yeah.
That's just how the way films hit you, isn't it?
I think it's the kind of film where, you don't go into it expecting a masterpiece, but you get something out of the kind of details, the minutiae.
Definitely.
And I think that's how both of you and I, not
You have to.
caring as much about the bigger picture, it's all about the little bits, the details. You take what you can.
Yeah, or else you're miserable, because there's a lot of not good out there. Speaking of not good out there. Sorry.
You're going to segue into the Black Country.
That's more of something for you to say. I was going to segue into our novelty tape this week.
Look, you can call it a dump if you want. I give you the pass.
Mate, I just spent an hour and 10 minutes watching a video about it. I know it's about... Not to spoil anything, they talk about how things aren't going great there. And that was the early 90s.
It does end with,
Optimism.
things aren't going very well here, but the Black Country is on the up and up.
Explain what the Black Country is.
The Black Country is an area west of Birmingham, within the West Midlands County.
Birmingham?
Within the West Midlands County.
I will interject with accents throughout.
Alright. It used to be a kind of centre of industry, coal mining, trades work, stuff like that during the Industrial Revolution and so on.
As I've learned from watching a history of the Black Country.
As you have. It's where I am from.
Yes.
I'm from Warsaw in the Black Country. Well, it covers most of the metropolitan boroughs of Dudley, Sandwell, Walsall and Wolverhampton. Well, Dudley and Tipton are kind of considered the core part. Walsall's more... The accent isn't as thick in Walsall. If you go to Tipton, I think it's quite thick.
Should we get straight into the accents?
It does start
Knowing you for... How long have I known you?
5 years?
5 years? I kind of get it. I mean, you will jokingly do very Black Country accents occasionally.
Yeah.
And your standard accent is a mess, as it is.
The audience is well aware of that. I try my best to clean it up.
I think I have a decent handle on the accent, but there is a couple who are interviewed in this tape.
Yes, and
who take things to another level.
The tape kind of... One of the first things they discuss is the Black Country accent and dialect, which is derived, I think, from Middle English and some Old English, because they talk about how the area was settled by Anglo-Saxons.
Yes.
In the early part of the 12th century or something like that, and how a lot of that accent and dialect has been maintained. Like, people still say thee and thou and thy, and they were about some older people even say, instead of houses, they'll say housen.
Yes.
I have never heard that before in my life.
Folkin instead of folk.
Yeah. But yeah, they interview this couple who have very thick accents. What did you think of those two, Rowan?
I could get bits. Because it's English.
Yeah, it's English.
But it's like English. Imagine if you take a language and put it under some thick mud and you got to fish it out and you're like, oh, I can really trying to feel it. I can feel the word there, but I have to fight my way to get it.
We talk about Scots now, is that what we're talking about?
Yes, we're speaking about Doric. Doric's time will come on the podcast, I'm almost sure.
Yeah, but I understood pretty much everything these couple were saying.
Yeah.
There's the guy who's talking about how in the old days you could get a part for it, bit, and then you can't even get water for that there, and stuff like that.
Yes.
I couldn't understand the bit he was saying about how you have a stab, halfpenny stab, and they kind of pressed on the halfpenny stab. You can't get stabbed now.
Well, that's the thing. The video doesn't explain what they're talking about. Obviously, they must have been interviewed under the pretense of oh, can you talk about the Black Country?
Yeah. But
in the context of the tape, they're just look at these freaks and how they talk. It wasn't about what they were saying. It was just you listening to what they're saying. Because they must assume that people don't know.
Should have put subtitles on.
That's what I think.
There's a bit, just before you say, there's a bit where they're talking about how I think their parents went to Dudley for work, and they got sprayed with a hose.
Is that a common thing?
Possibly.
I'm
not from Dudley, am I?
Yes, of course. Not one of those dudders. I was going to say, we've mentioned this before with previous novelty tapes. Who is the audience for this?
Me?
So you can learn about your people?
It's not me. People from the Black Country are interested in the stuff. It does say it's sold in the W.H. Smith in the Merry Hill Centre.
Which I have learned about through this tape. A shopping centre which has a monorail.
Yeah. I don't know if that's still there. I've been to the Merry Hill Centre. People talk about it.
Is it the hot place to be in the Black Country?
They've got a CEX.
There you go. I feel like I'm coming across as being demeaning to the Black Country. But do I have your blessing?
Yeah, go on.
Okay. Well, the people who made this tape mentioned there's also available a history of Birmingham and coming soon a history of Coventry. So it's obviously someone who's a passion for historical, geographical history.
Yeah. Well, it's produced by. Did it say by? Well, it's hosted by Jenny Wilkes from BBC Midlands.
It's produced by DVH Productions.
Maybe that's a West Midlands based.
It must be, yeah.
Thing about history.
And they've got, what was it? You said Jenny Wilkes from
BBC Midlands.
Yeah.
She's no George Alakaya. He was my favourite news reader as a kid. That's his name.
Cool.
I think my mum saw him in the Arboretum once.
Or as you have informed me, how do you lot...
The Arbo.
The Arbo. Arboretum seems nice. I mean, the fun thing about this is that you talked about these places for years, like the Arboretum and the High Street, whatever. and I'm finally seeing a version of it from 30 years ago.
It's interesting seeing, because there's kind of been a revival of Black Country, interest in Black Country culture and history in the last 15 years or so. I mean, they've got
You've got the pin.
Got the little flag.
You mentioned, sorry, not to cut you off, but you mentioned that's a new thing, right? The flag.
They introduced the flag in 2009 or something, and then the year before that they had the tartan, and I think in the last 5 years they've made an anthem or something.
Sorry, what?
Oh, I don't know what the anthem is. I mean, this is all a feeble attempt to entrench, kind of passion and solidarity for one's increasingly depressing and deprived surroundings. But, it's good to support the, heritage and so on. Would be nice to have some funding in local services and
there you go.
Economy, but...
Well, you mentioned the optimism they mentioned at the end of the tape. It's these are some projects which could be happening. And...
I don't recall any of these projects happening.
Yeah, it seems like perpetual optimism and being let down, which is a huge shame.
I mean, it's the classic kind of post-industrial, British town thing where they've all entered terminal decline.
I feel like it's no more... This is the example of that.
Yeah.
One of the prime examples of all these... I mean, it rattles through ooh, this town is known for, coal.
Yeah.
As you said, Walsall's known for its saddle making. There's, one of them, Willenhall, makes locks or something. They all have their own little craft or industry.
Yeah. Obviously, that's not enough to sustain the people that's there now.
Yes.
And a lot of the old factories are all shut down and stuff. I mean, this is a big... The whole Black Country is Brexit Central, isn't it?
It depends on what you mean.
The Red Wall, which is significant or something. Yeah, the whole area is just a mess.
It's kind of funny that throughout this tape they use a lot of just runaway ominous music. Without even saying anything, even at points they'll be showing ooh, here's industry from a couple of centuries ago, and they've just got ominous music underneath it.
It's interesting. They didn't mention my favourite fact about the Black Country, which is that Mordor from Lord of the Rings is... Tolkien was inspired by the Black Country to make that.
That would make sense, the fact that they put N at the end of things.
Yeah, there you go.
That's his name. His name is actually...
What are you on about?
I was going to say the character name Tolkien, but that's his real name.
Was he born in South Africa? He did live in, I think, Edgbaston, which is Birmingham.
Would you like to also mention a lot of music that comes from the Black Country?
Yeah, wasn't even mentioned in this. They didn't mention Noddy Holder.
No, not Noddy Holder.
Didn't mention Led Zeppelin. Didn't mention...
Sabbath?
Black Sabbath's from Birmingham.
Oh.
But a lot of heavy metal music.
I'll have to tune into history of Birmingham for that one.
All the West Midlands basically invented heavy metal music in general.
Your friend Georgia Smith?
Georgia Smith is from Walsall, yeah. Auckland specifically.
I mean, it's not without its history.
No.
In places you wouldn't expect, as you said, music.
Lenny Henry is from Dudley.
Oh, yeah.
Frank Skinner is from West Brom. That mentioned in this tape. This was all about old stuff.
It's probably peak Skinner and Henry.
Yeah, it's
early 90s.
What did you think of the other bits of the tape? It's kind of boring.
You seem to get a lot of enjoyment. You seem to get more enjoyment out of it than me, just because it's your local history.
Just kind of seeing stuff and being like, oh yeah.
It's more. I mean, it's more interesting. I can't say for sure, but I feel like you'll retain a lot of this information more than me.
Probably. It's interesting seeing this tape how little of the Black Country I've been to. I've only really been to Walsall. I've been to the Black Country Museum, where you can see all the old stuff.
Yes, it does. It focuses a lot on Dudley and the things around Dudley, which makes sense if you're saying it's the capital of the Black Country, yeah. Dudley, as you've been saying for years.
Yeah. There's a bit where the guy was like, and then we'll talk about Wednesbury, or Wedgbury, as the locals say. Never heard that. Maybe people do say Wednesbury.
You're just not a true local.
No, I would have liked to hear more about the sort of just accent stuff, dialect stuff. I find all that quite fun.
Yeah.
Like how we call the canal the Cut.
Up the cut.
Up the cut.
Do you want to blast off a couple of your classic Walsall sayings? Because you've been injecting them into our conversation with friends for years.
Let me just get the Wikipedia page.
No, you're always going about Bill's mothers, right?
Yeah, no one actually says the phrase "eat a off Doc" or Bill's mothers.
So is it like a joke, or is it like an old thing that's phased out?
One thing that I didn't realise wasn't said by people that I say all the time is referring to the tat man. As in the guy who comes around and collects scrap metal.
Not something I've ever encountered in
You know, the guy who drives around in his van and says any old tat.
No.
And if you call someone a tatter, it means a scrap collector.
No.
I believe there's a football chant around Wolverhampton that has to do with tat or something.
Interesting. You also mentioned that...
Babby, we say babby for baby.
Speaking of family relations, that you are the only people in the UK who say mom instead of mum.
Yeah, I don't know why that is.
That's just a weird one, isn't it?
Yeah, it's inexplicable. We're not American.
Mom.
Say gooing. I say that now.
Going out?
Yeah, gooing out. Gooing off home. If you say I'm going home, you'd say I'm gooing home. I say that sometimes. I say take instead of take and make instead of make.
Yeah.
K-lied means drunk.
K-lied?
Yeah. It's weird, isn't it?
It is a bit weird. It was quite informative, though. It was, but not in the most entertaining way. It was the kind of thing I could see this being trotted out on those old TVs on carts. You know the ones I mean, the primary school ones, and like the lower thing is the VHS player, and you just sit there.
Maybe it's kind of designed for that kind of thing.
Definitely, I mean, that's the audience.
Yeah. You enjoyed when I told you that horses said as os.
Os, yeah. Riding an os.
Getting on the os.
Yeah, I feel like that was a whole VHS market that doesn't exist anymore just because of YouTube. It's like, I mean, this today would be a video essay on YouTube.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, we saw the clip of the couple speaking on YouTube.
That is true, yeah.
Yeah, which I actually saw last week, inexplicably.
Spoil
Didn't realise
it
it
for
was from
yourself.
this.
Spoil it for yourself, yeah. But I'm glad that I came across this.
I was so shocked when you dropped this on me.
I know, after we finished recording, Mark turned to me and goes, I couldn't have... What was it you said? Like, it was like, that was like the least thing I was expecting. Like, the Black Country. We love it. Let's talk about the Black Country.
Yeah, I'm glad
I've been hearing about it for years. I'm glad I got a taste. Can't wait to go there for real.
I was expecting... I don't know what I was expecting. It made me want to go to more places in the Black Country that I haven't been to.
That's probably the purpose of it.
Yeah.
It's worked.
I've been wanting to
You've got the bug.
I've been wanting to go to some of the pubs.
Yeah, there you go.
They got the
Banks' beer.
You saw the Banks' Beer Brewery.
Yeah.
You can't really get that in a lot of places. I only know one pub you can get it in. And that's quite far from where I live.
What a shame.
I like Banks' Bitter. They have a lot of local brewery stuff as well, because they've got that campaign for real ale now.
Okay.
That's quite had an influence. I liked when I saw St Matthew's Church, because...
Oh, yes, you mentioned your local church.
We used to go to that in primary school.
Right,
and you can see it on top of the hill.
The Walsall stuff actually looked kind of nice. There was like a view from a hill that seemed kind of cool. As much as you talk about it, I was like, oh, it's actually quite a nice place.
It's not the worst place in the world. I mean, it's a bit of a stab town these days.
Stab town?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's no high street at all.
But that's everywhere.
Yeah, I used to go to this local shopping arcade called the Old Square, where they had Game Station. So I was in there all the time.
Love
and they had
the
like
Game Station.
They had a big Tesco in there. They had Debenhams.
A big Tesco in the shopping centre.
Yeah.
Oh.
And they had Debenhams. They had the 99p store, of course. The card shop. All that's gone now. It's totally dead in there. And like a couple of years ago, they were trying to revitalise it very slightly by having like a gallery in there. There's nothing there now.
The thing is with things like that, it's such a different vibe to like big Tesco to art gallery. It's like, who's planning that day out?
Yeah, I remember the Tesco closed, then the Game Station closed, and the whole thing just died instantly. And now Debenhams has got, of course.
Game Station near me was like this in the same unit as a Blockbuster. Like half the stores a Game Station, half was a Blockbuster.
Ah, see, for me, Blockbuster was in the... we've got another area called the Crown Wharf, where they have lots of shops. It's quite near the canal. They've revitalised a whole area of stuff near the canal with like a cinema and some like stuff like iguanas.
Los Iguanas?
Yeah,
Restaurant?
restaurants like
yeah.
that, like you get in Trinity Centre at the top. This is
Union
for our
Square.
Aberdeen viewers. Yeah,
Union Square's all the restaurants upstairs, yeah.
yeah, like one of those kind of places. They've built a bunch of those on the canal. They've built a bunch of those new, like, flats. You know, those expensive flats, like in Leith.
Yeah,
Like on the Leith waterfront.
yeah.
Like that kind of thing. That's kind of...
It's a proven thing to work. If everyone's doing it, it's got to work, you see.
That's what they want to do. They want to follow the Preston model. Yeah, that goes quite well.
You like your Preston model.
It gets results, Rowan. It's not just about fucking investing in some massive shopping centre.
Yeah.
It's specific targeting. Then again, Walsall Council is horrendously corrupt.
But there you go.
It's run by this guy called Mike Bird, who's been like the leader of the council for like 10 or 20 years or something. He's a
Funny you
prick.
talk about companies like that because this whole vibe of the early 90s England just gave me Mr. Bean vibes. I now, then that you said, I just imagine like Mr. Bean making decisions for like local councils.
Like 1992 to 97 especially, like that Tory government was very much the kind of there is no hope time.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we thought there was hope for a bit, but actually there wasn't.
Things were only going to get better. Allegedly.
He did say that. He did say
A
that.
lot. Do you have any thoughts to wrap up this tape that are about Tony Blair?
Do you have any comparisons to make between Aberdeen and the Black Country?
You have lived in both.
Exactly.
There you go. Full circle.
Nothing else.
Tips for next week.
Yeah, let's do the tips for next week.
Good, good.
It's been a weird episode.
Yeah. Would you like to show me first?
Yes, sure. There it is. Pass it over to you.
I can't even read this. In the cut.
Yes. And
Funny, we were talking about being up the cut earlier.
So we were. It's a Gene Campion film. Director of...
Meg Ryan,
The
Mark
Piano.
Ruffalo, and Jennifer Jason Leigh.
Yes. I like that cast.
Don't know anything about this film.
It's Gene Campion, one of her... I think it's had sort of a revival in critical estimation in recent years as being misunderstood. I think it's like a kind of feminist erotic thriller is what I've heard.
Ooh,
Or
okay.
something along those lines.
I'm more than up for it.
It's on Mubi at the moment if our audience want to check it out. Rowan's going to pass me the tape
Here's my tape.
It's... Oh, God.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Have you seen this film?
No, I've never seen it.
Yeah. I forgot you just had the tape. Yeah. It's To Sir With Love 2. Directed by Peter Bogdanovich. Starring Sidney Poitier. We've often spoken about Peter Bogdanovich. Have we spoken about him on the show?
Maybe
I
a little
mentioned him
in
last
Orson
week.
Welles, yes, but we can fully go into Bogdanovich
We're big fans
next
of...
week.
We're big...
We have a large interest in Peter Bogdanovich.
Peter Bogdanovich is someone who we discuss.
Yeah, discuss.
We've seen St. Jack.
I will tell the story of why I own this tape as well next week.
Good.
Speaking of tapes, do you want
Sure.
to do a pre-shake for you? And now here's the hat.
Shake, shake, shake.
Shake, shake, shake.
Shake your hat. 11. Rowan, I'm not optimistic about the noises you're making in relation to this tape.
Oh God, this might be our roughest episode yet.
Let me
I'm so sorry.
check underneath the...
I'm sorry.
what I can see. What does this say? Boots something?
Read the spine.
Boots scooted. It's a line dance video, Rowan. It's a video about line dancing. There's middle-aged people wearing cowboy hats in the front.
I'm very sorry.
They've all got one knee up when they're holding their cowboy hats.
Oh, because of our hiatus, I'd forgotten what was in this bio.
Boot scooting.
Are you looking forward to learning how to dance?
I don't really know much about line dancing except that it's a bit cringe.
Oh.
I don't want to disparage the line dancing community.
With music by New Frontier.
Who's
I
that?
don't know.
Is that like
We'll
Donald
fi-
Fagen's New Frontier?
We'll find out next time on Tapes, I suppose.
Boot scooting.
And with that, I should remind.
Sorry, you carry on.
And with that, I should remind our audience, all of you, if you enjoyed this episode, please listen next week.
Please.
And feel
Don't
free.
let our energy being fade.
No, I'm excited. Feel free to follow us on Twitter at OnTapesPodcast. If you want to send us an email telling us how excited you are for next week's episode, you can do that at ontapespodcast@gmail.com. And with that, do you have any closing remarks, Mark?
No.
Okay, well, and with that, I'll say goodbye.
Goodbye.